we're going to start off right off the top with the major news story that came out of the story, and that was the abrupt end to the main event between Mike Santana and Steve Maclin. For those of you that had not seen the match, of course, this had been the lead up over the past month to headline the show after the Feast or Fired match where Maclin got the fired briefcase. They worked an angle, reintroducing him, turning on Mike Santana, and doing a series of like a really strong sit-down segment a week ago on Impact in the lead up to this match. So this was the focus of the show. And unfortunately, Steve Maclin just got knocked silly off of this super kick very early on. We're talking about two and a half minutes into the match, and they're sort of doing the Fry Takayama spot with strikes, and then Mike Santana follows with a super kick. And when you see this, if you have the trained eye of watching fights, you can see the way he goes down. It is very much of a fighter that has just been rocked and is not in control of their landing. And he goes down, and the MVP of this moment was referee Alice Lane, who immediately observed that there was a problem with Steve Maclin. She got involved to check in on him. Mike Santana appeared to, just have the mentality any wrestler would of just continuing forward. And Alice Lane just put herself in front of Mike Santana, alerting him that there was a problem. She flashed the X sign, and medical personnel were there to check on Steve Maclin. You saw Carlos Silva coming over to observe what was happening. And from there, what can only be described as either an audible or a spot that was going to occur later in the match, with Eddie Edwards running down and attacking Santana. This was after it was only a couple of minutes, but it was pretty much dead air because Tom Hannafan and Matthew Raywalt are not reacting to this in the moment. They just go silent at a certain point, and Raywalt finally interjects, stating this is not ballet. So Edwards just is kind of coming out there, what feels like to just do something to keep the match going. And they had a brief brawl ending with Santana putting Edwards through a table on the floor with a splash. And Mackenzie Mitchell just announces the match is over. She actually announced that Mike Santana was the winner by no contest, which would be a first type of match result. And during the skirmish with Santana and Edwards, Maclin is just ushered to the back, and you never see him again. There is no follow-up beyond that, and the show just ends like that. Santana, you could see, was visibly, and understandably upset about the circumstances here. And there was, further update on things that came out from SI.com had a story out today that they had learned, this is from John Elba, the takedown on SI has learned that after TNA officials evaluated Maclin for a concussion, he was sent to the hospital for further tests. TNA President Carlos Silva told the takedown that Maclin was not ultimately diagnosed with a concussion, as he cleared all of his tests and was released to go back to his hotel for the night. So it seems as though this was not something where it's going to have a lingering effect on Steve Maclin, but we often are discussing these types of incidents, and it tends to default to what went wrong. Let's take a moment to talk about all that went right in this situation, primarily because you had a referee in Alice Lane who immediately understood the situation and took command of the scene. As we have all often talked about, wrestlers will always have it ingrained in them. And this isn't a negative, it's just a reality. They will always have it in them to just, you push forward, you get to the end of the match. That's the assignment, and we are not deviating from the assignment. The referee has to sometimes be the bad guy to get in between and stop the assignment. And the new assignment was Steve Maclin's health and his safety at that moment. 100% credit to Alice Lane for how this was covered, and 100% credit to TNA that they did not blink in the idea that this is our title match, this is our main event, we're on a live special, and it was just, no, we have been throwing a curveball, and the priority is no longer getting to a finish of this match. The priority is Steve Maclin. So I think a lot of kudos go out to TNA that we have often spoken about of, significant matches, main events, and what is the protocol going to be when the stakes are higher. Now, I'm not saying this was the main event of WrestleMania, but this was a hyped up match for a month. They were on a live special, and they opted to just pull the plug on the match. And I think your audience would understand that, especially in this day and age. There was not a riot in New Orleans. It was, the concern was Steve Maclin. And it appears that there is at least a good outcome to this, in that Steve Maclin is not going to be, out for too long. And this is pro wrestling, where you can turn this into a story that, listen, Steve Maclin has pushed this guy to the limit, and Mike Santana unloaded on him, and it can set up a rematch down the road. Like, this is very easy stuff to deal with. The priority is that, your participants are healthy at the end of this. So that was the main story coming out of Sacrifice. But again, I think the headline should be the handling of this, which I thought was to be commended. Obviously, there are different circumstances whenever you are looking at this. I know people will compare this to the OVW situation of a few weeks ago and any other incidents that we have seen over the years, whether it is Bill Goldberg being concussed in a match, or The Undertaker at a WrestleMania, or Tomohiro Ishii. The list goes on and on of performers we have seen that have been compromised and continued on in matches. I was relieved to see the fact that that was not the default in this type of a match. So the Post Wrestling Cafe is your one-stop shop for all of the coverage that Post Wrestling has to offer. 2 big rewind-aways this month with WWF Insurrection from May of 2002. This UK-only pay-per-view featured the Raw brand going overseas and ending with the infamous plane ride from hell. Then we're going to take a look at AWA's Super Sunday from April of 1983. A new edition of Talk Can Be Yours, plus MCU Later, Book Club, and coverage of UFC 326, TNA Sacrifice, and of course, XL editions of Rewind to Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown with all the news of the day. Join now at postwrestlingcafe.com.